The skies over Lake Balaton, Hungary, October 12, 1944. High above the azure waters, a lone P-51 Mustang with a distinctive red tail weaved through a wall of flak, its 6 Browning machine guns silent, waiting. Behind the control stick, First Lieutenant Lee "Buddy" Archer scanned the horizon, his breath fogging the canopy as the temperature dropped to 30 degrees below zero at 26,000 feet. Sweat beaded beneath his oxygen mask, despite the cold. Through the bulletproof glass, he spotted them, 3 Messerschmitt Bf-109s, their distinctive gull wings silhouetted against the clouds, hunting for American bombers returning from a raid on German oil facilities. Archer's earpiece crackled with urgent calls from his wingman, but his focus narrowed to the task at hand. The German pilots hadn't spotted him yet. For a moment, time seemed suspended as Archer made his decision to engage against odds that military strategists would deem suicidal. 3 against 1. But First Lieutenant Archer wasn't just any pilot. He was a Tuskegee Airman, one of the elite black fighter pilots that the Luftwaffe had come to call Schwarze Vogelmenschen, black birdmen, with a mixture of fear and reluctant respect. Pushing the throttle forward, Archer's P-51C Ina the Macon Bell, named after his beloved wife, roared to life. The Mustang's Packard-built Merlin engine thundered as he closed the distance. In the next 10 minutes, Lee Archer would perform a feat that few pilots in aerial combat history had achieved, shooting down 3 enemy aircraft in a single engagement, cementing his reputation as one of the most formidable fighter pilots of World War II. No one in the 332nd Fighter Group knew that one man's courage that morning would forever alter the course of both military aviation history and America's painful journey toward racial equality. Born in Yonkers, New York on September 6, 1919, Lee Andrew Archer, Jr. was raised in a world that consistently told him what he couldn't become. Growing up in the vibrant but economically struggling community of Harlem during the 20s and 30s, young Lee developed an early fascination with aircraft. As a child, he would spend hours watching planes take off and land at nearby airfields, dreaming of someday taking to the skies himself. But in an America rigidly segregated by Jim Crow laws, the idea of a black military pilot seemed as distant as the stars themselves. Archer was the son of a postal worker father who had instilled in him a powerful sense of discipline and dignity. "My father always told me that excellence can't be denied forever," Archer would later recall to his squadron mates during quiet evenings at the air base in Ramatelli, Italy. He said the doors might be closed now, but someone's going to have to kick them down eventually. Despite the limited educational opportunities available to black Americans, Archer proved to be an exceptional student. He attended New York University, majoring in international relations, a choice that revealed his expansive worldview even as a young man. But world events would soon reshape his path. As war clouds gathered over Europe, Archer made a decision that would alter the course of his life. In 1941, as America prepared for war, he left his studies to enlist in the United States Army, determined to serve his country despite its treatment of black citizens. "I never thought about it as proving something," Archer would later tell reporters in the 1980s. "I just knew I could fly as well as anybody. The real question was whether they'd let me show it." That modesty belied the enormous significance of what Archer and his fellow black airmen were about to undertake. Not just a military mission, but a mission to shatter the poisonous myth of racial inferiority that had been enshrined in American military policy since its founding. Initially assigned to a communications unit as a telegrapher in Georgia, Archer experienced firsthand the bitter paradox of fighting for democracy abroad while being denied basic rights at home. On military bases in the American South, he encountered colored-only drinking fountains, segregated mess halls, and was barred from officers' clubs, despite wearing the uniform of the United States Army. These indignities burned deep, but Archer remained focused on his ultimate goal, to fly. In 1941, after intense pressure from civil rights organizations and an executive order from President Roosevelt, the Army Air Corps reluctantly began a program to train black pilots at Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama. When the policy changed, Archer seized the opportunity, applying and earning acceptance into this experimental program that many military leaders privately hoped would fail. The odds were stacked against these pioneering black aviators from the start. The training was intentionally more rigorous than at white flight schools, with instructors ordered to wash out cadets for the slightest infractions. "They expected us to fail," Archer later explained. "We knew that if just one of us messed up, they'd shut the whole program down and say, 'See, we told you they couldn't do it.'" This extraordinary pressure created an environment where excellence wasn't merely encouraged, it was the only option for survival. He was one of only 994 black pilots who would complete the punishing training at Tuskegee. Out of the more than 14,000 men and women who served as part of what would later be known as the Tuskegee Experiment. As he pinned on his wings that hot Alabama summer day, Archer could never have imagined that within a year he would find himself locked in mortal combat with the world's most formidable air force, the German Luftwaffe, over the skies of Nazi-occupied Europe. Archer not only survived this crucible, he thrived. On July 28, 1943, he graduated first in his class and received his wings and commission as a second lieutenant. Nor could he have predicted that his extraordinary skills as a fighter pilot would help shatter racial barriers that had seemed impenetrable for generations. The journey of Lee Archer and the Tuskegee Airmen unfolded against the backdrop of World War II, the most destructive conflict in human history. By 1943, the war had reached a critical phase. The tide had begun to turn against Nazi Germany, but Hitler's war machine remained formidable, particularly in the air. The Luftwaffe, led by commanders like Adolf Galland and staffed with experienced aces who had cut their teeth in the Spanish Civil War and the early blitzkriegs across Europe, represented one of the greatest challenges facing Allied air forces. The strategic bombing campaign against German industrial and military targets had become a cornerstone of Allied strategy, but these massive bomber formations proved vulnerable without fighter escorts. Early in the war, American bombers would fly daylight missions with catastrophic loss rates. On some raids, nearly 30% of aircraft failed to return to base. The development of long-range fighter escorts became essential if the bombing campaign was to succeed. This was the military context into which the 332nd Fighter Group, comprised of the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons, was deployed. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., himself a West Point graduate and son of the first black general in the U.S. Army, commanded this all-black fighter group. Their primary mission: escort bomber formations deep into enemy territory and bring them home safely. In April 1943, the 99th Fighter Squadron, the first black flying unit, deployed to North Africa. Initially equipped with P-40 Warhawk fighter bomber aircraft, they later transitioned to the Bell P-39 Airacobra. By 1944, when Archer joined the 302nd Fighter Squadron, the group had been equipped with the legendary P-51 Mustang, perhaps the finest fighter aircraft of World War II. With its exceptional range, speed, and maneuverability, the Mustang was ideally suited for the long-range escort missions that would define the Tuskegee Airmen Service. The P-51 Mustang that Archer would fly into combat was a revolutionary aircraft. Powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine built under license by Packard, it could reach speeds over 440 miles per hour, at a service ceiling of 41,900 feet, and most critically, could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The Mustang was armed with 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns with 2,650 rounds of ammunition. In the hands of a skilled pilot like Archer, it was a formidable weapon. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Beyond the military objectives lay an equally important goal, proving that black pilots could fight with the same skill, courage, and effectiveness as their white counterparts. Every mission flown by the Tuskegee Airmen carried this double burden. They weren't just fighting the Luftwaffe, they were fighting against centuries of racial prejudice. "We knew we were under a microscope," Archer later explained. "White pilots could have a bad day, lose a bomber, and it was just the fortunes of war. If we lost a bomber, it would be because black men weren't capable of fighter escort duty. That reality meant we flew tighter formations, took greater risks to protect those bombers, and developed tactics that prioritized the safety of the bomber crews above all else." This approach would result in one of the most remarkable records of the air war. While the often repeated claim that the Tuskegee Airmen never lost a bomber has been debunked by historians who identified 27 bombers lost under their escort, their loss rate was significantly lower than the average for other fighter groups in the 15th Air Force. The Tuskegee Airmen lost an average of 7.7 bombers per 1,000 sorties, compared to an average of 46 bombers lost by other fighter groups, a testament to their exceptional skill and dedication. The distinctive red tails of their aircraft, which earned them the nickname Red Tails, became a welcome sight for bomber crews. Many bomber groups specifically requested Tuskegee Airmen escorts when possible, knowing their reputation for staying close to the bombers rather than pursuing enemy fighters to increase their personal victory tallies. This discipline would save countless lives among bomber crews, even as it potentially limited the number of aerial victories the Tuskegee pilots might have otherwise achieved. For Archer, the war began in earnest when he deployed to Italy in 1944, assigned to the 302nd Fighter Squadron of the 332nd Fighter Group, based at Ramitelli Air Base. Far from home, facing an enemy determined to shoot him from the sky, Archer was about to demonstrate the extraordinary skill that would distinguish him as one of the war's most remarkable pilots. The pressure on Archer and his fellow Tuskegee Airmen was immense. The skepticism from military leadership had not abated despite their proven combat record. A 1925 Army War College memorandum had proclaimed that black soldiers were mentally inferior to the white man, by nature subservient, physically unqualified. This poisonous thinking still infected the highest levels of the military establishment, creating an environment where black pilots had to prove themselves exceptional just to be considered adequate. Meanwhile, the strategic situation in Europe had reached a critical juncture. The Allied advance had stalled along several fronts, and the German military, though increasingly stretched thin, remained a lethal fighting force. The air war had intensified as both sides recognized its critical importance. The Tuskegee Airmen found themselves engaged in some of the war's most difficult missions, escorting bomber formations targeting oil refineries, aircraft factories, and transportation networks deep in enemy territory. For Lee Archer, the path to becoming one of the most feared black fighter pilots in the European theater began with his first aerial victory. On July 18, 1944, while escorting bombers on a mission over Memmingen, Germany, Archer encountered his first opportunity for aerial combat. Flying his P-51C with the distinctive red tail, he spotted a Messerschmitt Bf-109 attempting to attack the bomber formation. Without hesitation, Archer broke formation and engaged the enemy fighter. What followed was a textbook demonstration of aerial gunnery and tactical flying. Maneuvering his Mustang into position, Archer fired a short, controlled burst from his 650 caliber machine guns. The German fighter erupted in flames and spiraled toward the earth. With this first victory, Archer had drawn blood. He had proven, to himself and to anyone watching, that he belonged in the skies above Europe, defending American bombers and hunting the Luftwaffe. But it was 3 months later, on October 12, 1944, that Archer would etch his name into the annals of aviation history. On that clear autumn day, Archer and his wingman, the equally skilled Wendell Pruitt, were providing escort for bombers, returning from a raid when they encountered a formation of Hungarian Messerschmitt Bf-109s over Lake Balaton, Hungary. What followed was one of the most remarkable displays of fighter pilot skill in the European theater. In just 10 minutes, a lifetime in the frenetic world of dogfighting, Archer shot down 3 enemy fighters. This extraordinary feat earned Archer and Pruitt the nickname the Gruesome Twosome among their fellow pilots for their deadly effectiveness in combat. It also placed Archer in the rarefied company of only 4 Tuskegee airmen who achieved 3 aerial victories in a single day, the others being Joseph Ellsbury, Clarence Lucky Lester, and Harry Stewart, Jr. Archer's first victim that day was a Hungarian Bf-109 pilot who made the fatal mistake of attempting to attack the bomber formation head-on. Archer had positioned his Mustang slightly above and to the side of the approaching fighter, using the sun to mask his presence. As the Hungarian pilot focused on the bombers, Archer rolled in behind him, close to less than 300 yards, and fired a devastating burst that tore through the enemy's cockpit and fuel tank. The Bf-109 exploded in midair, debris raining down on the placid waters of Lake Balaton below. Moments later, as Archer pulled up from his first kill, he spotted 2 more enemy fighters attempting to attack the bomber formation from below. With fuel and ammunition to spare, Archer dove toward the pair of Hungarian fighters. They spotted him too late, already committed to their attack run on the bombers. Archer fired at the trailing aircraft first, sending it spiraling toward the earth, trailing black smoke from its ruined engine. The lead Hungarian pilot, now aware of the danger but unwilling to abandon his attack, continued toward the bombers. Archer, demonstrating extraordinary flying skill, cut across the enemy's flight path at a near-impossible angle. As his gun sight crossed the enemy fighter, Archer squeezed the trigger once more. His .50 caliber rounds found their mark, tearing through the Bf-109's wing root and fuel lines. The Hungarian fighter erupted in flames and plummeted earthward, its pilot never having a chance to eject. 3 kills in 10 minutes. It was an extraordinary feat by any standard, but particularly remarkable given the tactical situation and the skill of the Hungarian pilots, many of whom had been flying combat missions since the early days of the war. Later that evening, back at Ramitelli Air Base, as ground crews replenished Archer's P-51 with fuel and ammunition, the enormity of his achievement began to sink in. Fellow pilots gathered around, eager to hear first-hand accounts of his aerial triumph. Colonel Davis himself came to congratulate Archer, recognizing not just the personal achievement, but its significance for the entire Tuskegee program. "What you did today," Davis told Archer, "is more than just shooting down enemy aircraft. You've shown what's possible when skill and opportunity meet. Remember that." Those words would stay with Archer throughout his life, a reminder that his accomplishments weren't just personal victories, but steps toward a more equitable future. Yet even as he basked in the well-deserved recognition, Archer remained characteristically humble. When asked about his extraordinary feat by a war correspondent, he simply replied, "I was just doing my job. The bombers were our responsibility, and those fighters were threatening them. It's what any of us would have done." That modesty belied the exceptional skill and courage required to achieve what he had done. Many experienced fighter pilots went through entire careers without a single aerial victory. To score 3 in one engagement placed Archer in the highest echelon of combat aviators. Archer's skill in the air was matched by his tactical intelligence. Unlike some fighter pilots who became fixated on increasing their personal victory tallies, Archer never lost sight of his primary mission, protecting the bombers. His disciplined approach to combat exemplified the ethos of the Tuskegee Airmen, who placed mission success above personal glory. By the war's end, Archer had flown 169 combat missions across 11 countries, more than triple the 50 missions typically flown by white pilots. This disparity existed because the Army Air Forces did not provide replacement pilots for the Tuskegee units at the same rate as white squadrons, forcing black pilots to fly far more missions than their white counterparts. Despite this grueling operational tempo, Archer maintained his focus and effectiveness throughout. Officially credited with 4 aerial victories, Archer came tantalizingly close to achieving ace status, the designation given to pilots who shot down 5 or more enemy aircraft. Some historical accounts suggest that Archer may have actually achieved a 5th kill that was shared with another pilot, which would have made him the only black ace of World War II. However, the official record stands at 4 confirmed victories. In addition to his aerial victories, Archer also participated in the strafing of ground targets, a dangerous mission that required pilots to fly at treetop level, exposing themselves to intense anti-aircraft fire. During these missions, Archer demonstrated the same precision and courage that characterized his air-to-air combat, destroying enemy vehicles, supply dumps, and even grounded aircraft. One such mission occurred in February 1945, when Archer led a flight of 4 P-51 Mustangs on a strafing run against a German airfield near Vienna. Despite heavy flak, Archer's flight destroyed 6 enemy aircraft on the ground, several fuel trucks, and an ammunition depot. All 4 American planes returned safely, a testament to Archer's leadership and tactical acumen. Beyond the numbers, what distinguished Archer was his complete mastery of his aircraft and the aerial battlefield. German pilots who encountered the Red Tails reported that these pilots flew with exceptional discipline and skill. The Luftwaffe, which had initially dismissed the threat posed by black pilots based on the same racist assumptions prevalent in American society, quickly learned to respect and fear the Tuskegee Airmen. A captured Luftwaffe intelligence report from 1944 noted with apparent surprise, the colored American pilots are especially daring and aggressive in their tactics. They appear to have excellent situational awareness and frequently attack from unexpected angles. Their discipline in maintaining bomber escort is noteworthy. This grudging acknowledgement from the enemy spoke volumes about the impact Archer and his comrades were having in the skies over Europe. The significance of Archer's achievements extended far beyond the tactical air war. Each time he returned from a successful mission, each enemy aircraft he shot down represented another crack in the foundation of segregation and discrimination that had defined American military policy. The excellence of Archer and the Tuskegee Airmen could not be denied, even by the most ardent supporters of segregation. Life at Ramitelli Air Base presented its own unique challenges and moments of camaraderie for the Tuskegee Airmen. Located near the Adriatic coast of Italy, the base was isolated from most other American units, creating a close-knit community among the black aviators and ground personnel. Their quarters were Spartan, often just canvas tents with wooden floors, but they made the most of their circumstances. Between missions, pilots like Archer would gather in the makeshift officers' club, swapping stories, playing cards, or writing letters home. The food was barely tolerable. Powdered eggs, Spam, and K-rations, supplemented occasionally by fresh produce bartered from local Italian farmers. But these material discomforts paled in comparison to the pride they felt in their accomplishments and the bonds formed through shared danger and purpose. On the ground at Ramitelli, Archer became known not just for his prowess in the air, but for his leadership qualities on the ground. Junior pilots looked to him for guidance and inspiration. His calm demeanor under pressure, his methodical approach to training, and his unwavering belief in the abilities of his fellow black aviators made him a natural leader within the squadron. But he never talked much about his own accomplishments, recalled one of his squadron mates years later. He was always more focused on how we could fly better as a unit, how we could keep each other alive, how we could protect those bombers more effectively. There was no ego there, just determination and skill. This leadership extended beyond tactical matters. When newer pilots arrived at the base, often overwhelmed by the reality of combat and the additional burden of representing their race, Archer took them under his wing. He shared hard-won insights about enemy tactics, demonstrated maintenance checks that could save their lives, and, perhaps most importantly, instilled confidence that they belonged in the cockpit of a fighter plane just as much as any white pilot. Music became an important outlet for the stress of combat. Many of the Tuskegee Airmen were jazz aficionados, and impromptu jam sessions were common in the evenings. Archer himself wasn't much of a musician, but he appreciated the artistry of fellow pilots who could coax soulful melodies from battered saxophones or improvised drum kits. The sound of jazz drifting across the Italian countryside from an all-black air base represented yet another form of cultural expression and resistance. Despite the camaraderie within their ranks, the Tuskegee Airmen continued to face discrimination even as they put their lives on the line for their country. When white bomber crews specifically requested red tail escorts for dangerous missions, military leadership often downplayed or ignored these requests, reluctant to acknowledge the superior performance of the black fighter group. Official recognition of their achievements was frequently delayed or minimized in military reports. More personally painful was the treatment Tuskegee Airmen received when they had rare opportunities to visit other American bases or Italian cities on leave. At officers' clubs on white bases, they were often refused entry or relegated to segregated sections. In towns and cities, they sometimes encountered white American soldiers who were hostile to the sight of black men in officers' uniforms with pilots' wings. One particularly telling incident occurred when Archer and several fellow pilots were invited to a reception at a 15th Air Force headquarters after a successful mission. Upon arrival, they were directed to enter through a side door and were not introduced to the senior officers present. Rather than cause a scene, Archer and his comrades maintained their dignity, participated briefly in the event, and then quietly left, returning to Ramitelli where at least their accomplishments were recognized and valued. These indignities could have bred bitterness or resentment, but Archer and most of his fellow Tuskegee Airmen channeled their frustration into determination to excel further. They understood that their performance in the air was their most powerful argument against racism and discrimination. As Colonel Davis frequently reminded them, the only way to overcome prejudice is through performance. As the war in Europe approached its climax in the spring of 1945, the Tuskegee Airmen found themselves participating in some of the conflict's most significant air operations. On March 24, 1945, 43 P-51 Mustangs of the 332nd Fighter Group, led by Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, escorted B-17 bombers on one of the war's longest missions, a 1,600-mile round trip to Berlin. The target was a massive Daimler-Benz tank factory in the heart of Nazi Germany. The mission would become legendary, not just for its distance, but for its results. Encountering advanced German jet fighters, the Messerschmitt Me-262s, the Tuskegee Airmen shot down 3 of these revolutionary aircraft, despite being significantly outmatched in terms of speed. This achievement earned the 332nd Fighter Group a Distinguished Unit Citation, one of 3 such honors they would receive during the war. Though Archer didn't personally down any of the German jets on this mission, his contribution to the unit's overall combat effectiveness had helped prepare them for this ultimate test. The discipline, tactics, and esprit de corps that pilots like Archer had fostered within the group enabled this remarkable achievement against some of the most advanced aircraft of World War II. The Berlin mission showcased the culmination of everything the Tuskegee Airmen had learned and achieved. Flying at the extreme limits of their aircraft's range, navigating through enemy territory without the sophisticated electronic aids available to later generations, they successfully escorted bombers to the heart of the Nazi regime and back. Even the weather was against them. Temperatures at altitude dropped to 40 below zero, and navigation had to be done primarily by dead reckoning due to cloud cover. The encounter with the Me-262 jets was particularly notable. These German aircraft, powered by revolutionary turbojet engines, could achieve speeds nearly 100 miles per hour faster than the P-51 Mustang. Their superior speed should have made them nearly invulnerable to conventional fighter attack. Yet the Tuskegee pilots, through superior tactical awareness and flying skill, managed to overcome this technological advantage. As Captain Roscoe Brown, one of the pilots who shot down an Me-262 that day, later explained, "We couldn't outrun them, but we could outturn them. The jets had to fly fast to maintain stability, which meant they couldn't turn quickly without losing control. We used that weakness against them." This blend of tactical intelligence and flying skill characterized the Tuskegee Airmen throughout the war. They weren't just courageous, though their courage was undeniable. They were smart, adaptable, and innovative in their approach to aerial combat. These qualities allowed them to overcome not just the enemy in the air, but the systemic barriers placed in their path by their own military establishment. By the time Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Tuskegee Airmen had compiled an exceptional combat record. They had flown more than 15,000 sorties, shot down 112 enemy aircraft, destroyed or damaged another 150 aircraft on the ground, and, most importantly, protected countless American bomber crews on missions deep into enemy territory. The human cost of this achievement was substantial. 66 Tuskegee Airmen were killed in combat, and another 32 became prisoners of war. Among those lost was Wendell Pruitt, Archer's wingman and partner in the gruesome twosome. Pruitt, who had shot down 3 enemy aircraft himself, died in a training accident just weeks before the German surrender, a particularly cruel twist of fate for a man who had survived so many combat missions. For Archer and the other survivors, these losses were deeply personal. In the close-knit community of fighter pilots, especially one as isolated and cohesive as the Tuskegee Airmen, every loss was felt keenly. Yet, even in grief, they maintained their focus on the mission and their determination to prove through excellence what should never have needed proving, that Black Americans could fight with as much skill, courage, and effectiveness as anyone. The war's end brought a moment of reflection for Archer and his comrades. They had fought with distinction against America's external enemies, but the battle against discrimination at home was far from over. Upon returning to the United States, many Tuskegee Airmen experienced the cruel irony of being denied service at restaurants and forced to use segregated facilities while still in uniform, decorated with combat medals, earned defending American freedom. Archer himself recounted the bitter experience of disembarking from the troopship that brought him home from Europe. "I flew 169 combat missions when most pilots were flying 50, he later told reporters. "When I came back to the U.S., and down that gangplank there was a sign at the bottom, colored troops to the right, white troops to the left. This painful paradox of fighting for democracy abroad while being denied its basic promises at home would help fuel the nascent civil rights movement that would transform American society in the decades following the war. The Tuskegee Airmen had demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that the racist assumptions underlying segregation were fundamentally false. Their excellence in the most demanding circumstances had proven that opportunity, not race, was the determining factor in achievement. Unlike many Tuskegee Airmen who returned to civilian life after the war, Archer chose to remain in the military, transferring to the newly created United States Air Force in 1947. His post-war career would prove as remarkable as his wartime service, though in different ways. He continued to break racial barriers, rising through the ranks to become a lieutenant colonel before retiring in 1970. During his military career, Archer received numerous decorations beyond his Distinguished Flying Cross, including the Air Medal with 18 oak leaf clusters and the Distinguished Service Medal. He also received special citations from Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson for his contributions to national security in various classified roles. The post-war military, while still struggling with racial integration, offered Archer opportunities to continue his education and expand his skills. He attended advanced officer training and specialized intelligence schools developing expertise that would serve him well both in uniform and later in the corporate world. His analytical mind, combined with the discipline and leadership qualities honed in combat, made him particularly effective in strategic planning roles. Archer's experiences during this period revealed both progress and persistent challenges in military-race relations. The official policy of segregation had ended with President Truman's executive order in 1948, but informal discrimination continued. Black officers still found themselves passed over for promotions, assigned to less desirable posts, or excluded from social functions. Yet, compared to the rigidly segregated military of World War II, the changes were significant and undeniable. Throughout this transitional period, Archer maintained the same quiet determination and excellence that had characterized his combat service. He understood that each barrier he broke, each achievement he recorded, created opportunities for those who would follow. As one of the most decorated Tuskegee Airmen, his continued success in the Integrated Air Force carried symbolic weight beyond his individual accomplishments. After his military retirement, Archer embarked on a successful business career that would once again place him at the forefront of breaking racial barriers. He became one of the first black vice presidents of a major American corporation when he joined General Foods. Later, he helped create the venture capital division of Beatrice Foods and became chairman and CEO of Archer Asset Management. His transition to corporate America in the early 1970s coincided with increased attention to diversity in the wake of civil rights legislation. However, Archer was never a token hire. His military experience, education, and natural leadership abilities made him genuinely qualified for executive roles. What set him apart was his ability to navigate predominantly white corporate environments while maintaining his authenticity and dignity, skills he had first developed as a Tuskegee Airman. At General Foods, Archer applied the same methodical approach to business challenges that had served him well in combat. He became known for his ability to analyze complex situations, develop innovative strategies, and execute them with precision. His leadership style emphasized team building and recognizing talent regardless of background, perhaps influenced by his experiences at Ramitelli, where success depended on every member of the squadron working together effectively. Throughout his business career, Archer maintained a commitment to creating opportunities for other African Americans. He understood that his own success meant little if it didn't help open doors for others following in his footsteps. His approach to business leadership mirrored the quiet determination he had shown as a fighter pilot, focused on excellence, undeterred by obstacles, and guided by a vision of what could be achieved through perseverance and skill. Archer became particularly known for mentoring young black professionals, offering not just career advice, but insights on navigating the often unwritten rules of corporate America. Just as he had once guided new pilots at Ramitelli, he now helped guide a new generation through different but still challenging terrain. Many of his mentees would go on to achieve significant success themselves, extending Archer's influence far beyond his direct accomplishments. Beyond his corporate responsibilities, Archer remained connected to the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. He participated in reunions, spoke at schools about his experiences, and worked to ensure that the contributions of black aviators to World War II were not forgotten. As the years passed and public interest in the Tuskegee Airmen grew, Archer emerged as one of their most articulate and respected representatives. In 2005, at the age of 86, Archer demonstrated that his commitment to service hadn't diminished with age. He joined several fellow Tuskegee Airmen veterans on a visit to Balad Air Base in Iraq to meet with servicemen from the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing, the direct descendant of his old fighter group. Looking out at the assembled airmen, men and women of all races serving together, Archer observed, "This is the new Air Force. In the dining room, I see black, white, Asian, Pacific Islanders, people from different parts of Europe. This is what America is." That visit exemplified Archer's understanding of his own historical significance. He had helped create the conditions for the integrated military he now witnessed, a transformation that preceded and in many ways facilitated the broader civil rights advances in American society. The Tuskegee Airmen had demonstrated that excellence couldn't be confined by racial categories and that given equal opportunity, Black Americans could achieve at the highest levels in the most demanding circumstances. In 2007, Archer and his fellow Tuskegee Airmen were finally accorded one of the nation's highest honors when they were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. The ceremony in the Capitol Rotunda represented a belated but meaningful recognition of their extraordinary service and historical significance. President George W. Bush, presenting the medal, acknowledged, "The Tuskegee Airmen helped win a war, and you helped change our nation for the better." For Archer, now in his late 80s, the recognition was welcome but not essential to his sense of accomplishment. He had always known the value of what he and his comrades had achieved, regardless of official acknowledgement. The medals and honors, while appreciated, were secondary to the real legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen, the transformation of American society, and the inspiration they provided to generations of young African Americans. In his final years, Archer became an important keeper of the Tuskegee Airmen's legacy. He spoke to school groups, participated in documentaries, and shared his experiences with military historians. In 2009, he served as an advisor for George Lucas's film Red Tails, which dramatized the story of the Tuskegee Airmen for a new generation. During this period, Archer reflected often on the extraordinary journey from segregation to integration, from exclusion to recognition that he had witnessed and helped propel. He took particular satisfaction in seeing young Black pilots, both military and civilian, pursuing careers that would have been unimaginable in his youth. Each time he spoke with these younger aviators, he emphasized that his generation had opened doors, but it was up to them to walk through and continue pushing boundaries. Archer's approach to his own legacy was characterized by the same humility that had marked his military service. When asked about his place in history, he typically deflected attention to the collective achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen rather than his individual exploits. "What matters isn't that Lee Archer shot down some planes," he would say. "What matters is that we prove something that should never have needed proving, that the color of your skin has nothing to do with your ability to fight for your country or achieve excellence in any field." When Lee Archer died on January 27, 2010, at the age of 90, America lost not just a decorated war hero, but a living link to a transformative chapter in its history. His funeral at Arlington National Cemetery included full military honors, a fitting tribute to a man who had served his country with such distinction despite the obstacles placed in his path. As the honor guard folded the American flag draping his casket, those present reflected on a life that had spanned from the rigid segregation of the 1920s to the election of America's first Black president. Archer had not just witnessed this transformation. He had helped create it through his courage in combat, his excellence in every role he undertook, and his quiet persistence in the face of discrimination. The story of Lee "Buddy" Archer represents more than just individual heroism, though his personal courage was remarkable by any standard. His journey from a young man in Harlem who dreamed of flying to becoming one of the most accomplished fighter pilots of World War II embodies the broader narrative of the Tuskegee Airmen, men who refused to be defined or limited by racial prejudice, who performed with excellence under the most demanding circumstances, and who helped transform both military aviation and American society. The legacy of Archer and the Tuskegee Airmen lives on today in multiple dimensions. Most directly, they helped pave the way for the integration of the United States military in 1948, when President Harry Truman issued Executive Order 9981. This momentous step, taken just 3 years after the end of World War II, was influenced in no small part by the undeniable evidence provided by the Tuskegee Airmen that segregation, undermined military effectiveness and wasted valuable human potential. Beyond military integration, the example set by the Tuskegee Airmen reverberated throughout American society. Their success helped fuel the broader civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s by providing a powerful counterexample to the racist assumptions that underpinned segregation. If black pilots could excel in the technically demanding and high-pressure environment of aerial combat, how could anyone justify excluding African Americans from classrooms, voting booths, or job opportunities? In aviation specifically, the Tuskegee Airmen created pathways for future generations of black pilots in both military and civilian sectors. The barriers they broke down enabled figures like General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., the commander of the 332nd Fighter Group, to rise to the rank of four-star general, and for subsequent generations of African American aviators to pursue careers that would have been unimaginable before World War II. Perhaps most importantly, the story of Lee Archer and his fellow Tuskegee Airmen continues to inspire young people of all backgrounds. Their example demonstrates the power of excellence in the face of prejudice, the importance of perseverance against systemic obstacles, and the capacity of individual courage to catalyze broader social change. When a young person from a marginalized background looks up at the sky today and dreams of flying, they do so in a world partly shaped by the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. The achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen have been memorialized in various ways beyond the Congressional Gold Medal. The Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site, established at Moton Field in Tuskegee, Alabama, preserves the location where many of these pioneering aviators first learned to fly. Museums across the country feature exhibits about their contributions, and educational programs continue to share their story with new generations. Streets, schools, and scholarships bear their names, tangible reminders of their impact on American history. In the decades since World War II, as their story has become more widely known, the Tuskegee Airmen have assumed an almost mythic status in American culture, symbols of excellence overcoming prejudice, of patriotism despite discrimination, of dignity in the face of injustice. While this recognition is well-deserved, it's important to remember that they were real men with individual stories, personalities, and experiences. Lee Archer wasn't born a legend. He was a young man from Harlem who dreamed of flying, seized an opportunity when it finally appeared, and performed with extraordinary skill when given the chance. Understanding the Tuskegee Airmen as real people rather than symbols makes their achievements even more remarkable. They weren't superheroes immune to fear, doubt, or fatigue. They were human beings who faced the same dangers, hardships, and anxieties as other combat pilots, plus the additional burden of knowing that their performance would be judged not just on its own merits, but as a referendum on their entire race. As we reflect on the life and achievements of Lee Archer, the fighter pilot who shot down 3 enemy aircraft in 10 minutes over Lake Balaton, who flew 169 combat missions across 11 countries, who broke racial barriers in both military and corporate America, we are reminded of a fundamental truth about courage and character. True heroism isn't just about actions in combat, though Archer's bravery in the skies over Europe was undeniable. It's also about the moral courage to stand tall in the face of injustice, to pursue excellence when others expect failure, and to open doors for those who will follow. The most terrifying black U.S. fighter pilot of World War II wasn't just feared by enemy aces for his skill in aerial combat, though that fear was well-founded. What made Lee Archer truly formidable was something deeper, an unshakable belief in his own capability and worth, regardless of what a prejudiced society might say. That inner certainty, combined with extraordinary skill and discipline, made him not just a great fighter pilot, but a transformative figure in American history. For today's generation facing different but still daunting challenges, Archer's story offers powerful lessons. It teaches us that excellence is the most effective response to prejudice. It reminds us that meaningful change often comes not through grand gestures, but through persistent, disciplined performance that makes denial of equality increasingly untenable. It shows us that individual courage, multiplied across a community of like-minded people, can alter the course of history. As we face the challenges of our own time, the question that emerges from Archer's story is both simple and profound. Would you have had the courage to break barriers as he did? Would you have persisted in the face of systemic discrimination, risked your life in combat, and maintained your dignity and excellence throughout? The legacy of Lee Archer and the Tuskegee Airmen challenges each of us to answer these questions not just with words, but with our own actions in the face of injustice. In many ways, Archer's life embodied the contradiction and promise of America itself, a nation founded on ideals of liberty and equality, yet historically falling short of those ideals for many of its citizens. Like America, Archer contained multitudes: the frustrated young man denied opportunities because of his race, the disciplined fighter pilot who became the terror of enemy aces, the corporate pioneer opening doors for a new generation, the elder statesman helping preserve a crucial chapter of American history. His journey reminds us that progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. It requires individuals willing to stand up, step forward, and excel despite obstacles placed in their path. It requires both personal courage and collective action. It demands both patience for the long struggle and impatience with continuing injustice. Above all, it requires people who, like Archer, refuse to accept artificial limitations on human potential. On that October day in 1944, when Archer shot down 3 enemy fighters in 10 minutes over Lake Balaton, he wasn't just winning a battle in World War II. He was striking a blow against prejudice and discrimination. He was demonstrating through action rather than words that excellence knows no color. He was helping to create an America that, while still imperfect, would offer more opportunities to more of its citizens than the America he had known as a child in Harlem. That is Lee Archer's enduring legacy, not just the aircraft he shot down, but the barriers he helped dismantle. Not just the medals he earned, but the doors he helped open. Not just his personal courage, but his contribution to America's ongoing journey toward fulfilling its founding promise of equality for all. Share this story of exceptional courage so others remember what true heroism looks like, not just in combat, but in the longer, harder battle for human dignity and equal opportunity.